Hello, classic rock fans. I am reporting just a day after seeing Three Dog Night at the Uline Warehouse at Summerfest. It's one of the free stages at Summerfest. It's the stage I see bands at most often because that's where they tend to put the classic rock acts. And last night was no different. Headliner was Three Dog Night. They played at 10 p.m. just after Summerfest's opening fireworks, which was fantastic. I got down to the show about an hour before they started, which meant I had plenty of time to get a nice seat and then watch the fireworks before the band came out and played a great set. Now here's something I don't get to say a whole lot. Three Dog Night is a big-time nostalgia act for me, in the sense that I listened to their music a lot as a kid and loved it. Now, I've never stopped appreciating Three Dog Night. They've always held a special place in my heart, but they're, not at the top of my list, I guess. And unfortunately, I have taken them for granted for as long as I've been seeing concerts, because they've come to my town, including Summerfest, plenty of times in the past where I could have seen them, but I ultimately passed because there were other bands that I made a priority to go check out instead. To my regret, because Three Dog Night put on a great show, and like I said, there's a real nostalgia value for me. Unlike most of you watching, I didn't grow up in the 70s and 80s, so when I talk about classic rock, I'm not talking about bands that were at their peak when I was in high school and in my early 20s. I came to discover these bands way later. So the music doesn't really take me back in the same way I know it does for a lot of you watching. So I have a different fan dynamic with the music that I love. But Three Dog Night is an exception to this because my dad had their greatest hits on CD and I listened to it all the time as a kid. So listening to their music, songs like Blacker and White, Never Been to Spain, Shambhala, Joy to the World, One. These are the songs that absolutely bring me back to when I was a kid. So getting to see them last night was definitely very satisfactory for childhood me, and I had kind of that same feeling I did last year when I saw Ringo Starr and I saw him play Yellow Submarine, which is another song that was a big part of my childhood. And I think the reason that I like them so much as a kid is because they're incredibly family friendly. I was expecting to see a lot of families at the show I went to last night, but that really wasn't the makeup of the crowd. The crowd was mostly older folks. Whatever the case, it was a decent-sized crowd. A lot of the older fans definitely came out, definitely sang along. A lot of people dancing, which was nice. Sometimes I go to classic rock shows and nobody moves, for the whole set, and that sucks, but saw a lot of people dancing at this show, including guys, which is always a tell, because you could go to any show and women will dance, but the older dudes will just stand there and stare and maybe bop their head. But no, I saw a couple of older guys, letting loose a little bit, and good for them. And good for Three Dog Night for bringing that out in them. The show started off with a bunch of hits right away. Family of Man, Black and White, Never Been to Spain, Shambhala. Is Shambhala their best song? Yeah, I think so. But, wait a minute. What about Joy to the World? What about One? What about Old Fashioned Love Song? What about Mama Told Me Not to Come? Man, these guys had a lot of hits. Seriously, there was a point in the show where Danny Hutton, who is the last original member, was talking to the crowd, and he said, we had 21 straight top 40 hits. And I'm glad he said that because it reminded me that Three Dog Night, I think the criticism on them is that they're kind of a lightweight act because they didn't write a lot of their songs, but I don't think that criticism really holds up because these guys had a serious chart presence all through the late 60s and early 70s. Joy to the World was one of the biggest hits of the 70s, and I don't think it gets its proper respect. I remember, for one of the podcasts I did, I looked up, the biggest hits of whatever year Joy to the World came out, and I was kind of floored by how many weeks in a row it held the number one spot. And to be frank, I don't know enough about the Three Dog Night story to explain what happened to them, in the late 70s and the 80s. I don't know why those hits dried up. But I would guess Overexposure had a little something to do with it, because they were a consistent chart presence for quite a while. And unfortunately, it's been so long since those glory years that it is actually important for the lead singer to remind the crowd of that. At least for someone like me who's a music nerd. Because that gives me a better appreciation for the show I'm watching. He also said that, it's not just the pop charts. They were on the rock charts. They were on the country charts. They had an R&B hit. They were on, adult contemporary charts. So he said, having a variety of styles of hits was a big priority for the band, too. And he said that, and I guess maybe this was the core philosophy of the band, is that they came up with, or more to the point, his words, found songs they really like and recorded them in a way that just worked as far as pop success goes. And that's how they built their career. I like hearing about stuff like that on stage, so it was cool to hear him talk about that. So like I said, Danny Hutton, he's the last original member. He shares lead vocal duties with another guy named David Morgan. At first glance, I thought David Morgan was also an original member, or perhaps a heyday member, because he looked to be about the same age as Danny. But no, he joined in 2015 after another original member had, sadly passed away. I'm guessing he was brought on board because he had some sort of relationship with Danny going back a number of years, because typically bands like these, when they bring on new members, they bring on, significantly younger members. Especially with vocalists, because unfortunately vocals are hard to maintain as you get older. But he was not some newcomer. He was not a spring chicken. That guy is 77, but despite that, he sounded fantastic. And so did Danny Hutton, and Danny Hutton is 81. So, yeah, this is a band that's pretty long in the tooth. They've got a lot of experience behind them, but they're both singing still at a very high level. And to me, that's pretty much the most important thing for a legacy act to get right. If someone's struggling vocally, that becomes very obvious, and it does impact the show in a negative way. I've talked in the past about Vince Neil and David Lee Roth and Doug Gray from Marshall Tucker Band. These are guys who struggle vocally, and that impacts the show in a negative way, and it's a bummer to see. But, thankfully, even though they're significantly older than all those guys, Three Dog Night sounded great. So it was definitely worth going out to hear those golden oldies, those classic hits, sung very well by two guys who clearly love being on stage and were very appreciative for the crowd that was there. Halfway through the show, they played One. One is the loneliest number. Oh, man, great stuff. Let Me Serenade You, an old-fashioned love song. That might be my favorite song of theirs, but there's a whole bunch here. That might be my favorite song of theirs. Sure As I'm Sitting Here, which is a John Hyatt cover, going back to this whole point about them finding songs. If you look at a set list of theirs on Setlist FM, you'll see that most of the songs they play are covers of songs from big-name songwriters. Hoyt Axton, John Hyatt, Randy Newman. These are some of the biggest names in American songwriting history. And Three Dog Night either sought them out or they were sought out to play these songs. And I guess that brings up kind of my one, not complaint, but one recommendation or suggestion for the show. Because all these bands, they all look to my channel for my unsolicited advice. So here's my unsolicited advice to Three Dog Night. You have this rich history of working with and recording songs from these great songwriters. Why not mention that? Why not give some of these songwriters a little credit and let people know that, hey, this song is written by John Hyatt. A bunch of you know who that is. This song was written by Hoyt Axton. If you don't know who that is, you should look him up, Hey, here's a Randy Newman song, No, it's not Short People. That kind of thing. I think that would add to the show, at least for the diehard music nerds like myself, but I guess maybe not the most important stuff for casual fans, but just a suggestion. Going on, they did an Argent song called Liar. I had not heard that one before. I thought that was pretty cool. And then you have the big finish. Mama Told Me Not to Come. That's the Randy Newman song. Celebrate. Eli's Coming. They did a new song called Prayer of the Children, and then they finished up with Joy to the World, naturally. Now, the song Prayer for the Children, that was like an a cappella number, and they were all harmonizing together. It was a pretty beautiful composition. And they said, there's a lot of violence out in this world, but children are innocent, and that's what this song is about. And they made a point to say, but hey, we're not political, we're not taking a side here, we're just saying we need to remember that kids are getting hurt in all this violence. I guess that's probably the right way to do it. I'm sure it's tempting to have a song like that and want to state a political opinion. And maybe there's some people in the crowd who want you to state a political opinion if it's the one that they have. But honestly, in a music setting, unless the song is explicitly about a political issue, and even then, I would rather just skip the political monologue. So I like how they presented this one. And it did get a round of applause just for them saying, we're not being political here. So I think most of the audience is on the same page as I am. And with that, I ducked out in the last couple lines of Joy to the World, so I left the grounds with that song, playing in the background, which just felt great. I was, A, glad to beat the crowd out of there, but B, that's such a beautiful song. I understand why it was such a huge hit back in the early 70s. If you haven't heard it in a while, give it a listen. Give it a listen with fresh ears. It'll put you in a good mood. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Bum, bum. Great stuff. So, yeah, it was a really fun show. I enjoyed it a lot. I would absolutely recommend it if they come to your town. And if they do come to your town, don't take them for granted. If you're on the fence about them, it's time to go see them. If you haven't seen them before, like I had, not previously seen them, now's the time. They're still playing good, but we're getting to the point where you really shouldn't be assuming there's going to be a next time. Do so at your own risk, and don't take that risk. Just get the tickets, They're still playing well, but like I said, dudes are 81 and 77, okay? Classic rockers have proved they can do these shows as long as they're upright. But it's not fair for us as fans to assume that they are going to want to keep doing that into their mid-80s, late 80s. I mean, I know Willie Nelson's out there at 90, but come on. That's not a fair expectation for everybody else. So if they're coming to your town, you really should start thinking not just about them, about any bands who started in the 60s. It's 2024 now. I feel pretty confident that there will be no bands that started in the 60s touring in 2030. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow. I don't like saying it, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it. I'm only bringing it up as a call to action, if you will, an encouragement to see them now. Get the tickets now. See them while we have them, because I suspect this decade, unfortunately, is going to be where we do see the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, Roger Waters, oh, this one hurts, John Fogerty, the Beach Boys, and then bands like Three Dog Night, Jim Peterick and the Ides of March. These are just the groups off the top of my head that I suspect will be winding down in the next 5 years. Now, the nice thing about Three Dog Night is you're not going to have to pay the same prices you'd have to pay to see Roger Waters or the Rolling Stones. So if Three Dog Night comes to your neck of the woods, absolutely go check them out. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this review, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check out some of the other classic reviews I've done on this channel. If you're a fan of 60s music, I've talked about a couple of bands that started in the 60s, including some obscure ones, so I'm sure I've covered somebody you're a fan of. Otherwise, if you're just a fan of classic rock broadly, please check out the podcast I do. It's all about classic rock. We've had some fantastic guests on lately, and we have some big things in motion for the near future, so please subscribe and please stay tuned for that. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you've seen Three Dog Night recently, tell me what you think in the comments below. Otherwise, keep rocking.